Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and a warm welcome. This is Ali, your consultant at DinarStandard, and it's my pleasure to host today's roundtable once again. I think let me take you through the agenda for today. This is our fourth brief in our series of U.S.-Israel-Iran Regional Crisis 2026. We welcome you once again. Thank you for your time, for joining us. We will be going through the insights brief, the presentation, and then it'll be followed by a panel discussion. We have a prestigious panelists joining us today to discuss our focus on textile and fashion retail sector. We'll like to hear from you and get your Q&A as well. And then we'll close with our upcoming session announcements. All right, before we dive deep into our session, let me briefly introduce you to our panelists for today. We have Atteqa Malik, Karachi Biennale Trust Chairperson, Board of Directors, Pakistan-UK Business Council, Director, GIA Export Marketing Services. We have Rabia Zargarpur, Expert in Residence, Business of Fashion Consultancy, Sharjah Enterprise Center, Business Strategy Consultant, Rabia Zargarpur Consulting. We also have Mr. Basri Kamba, Chair of Rantai Textile Lestari, Indonesia. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it, but we welcome you all on board. And of course, this prestigious panelist would be led by our Senior Associate, Aaliya, Modest Fashion Lead at DinarStandard. So as you can see, this is the fourth in our Insights Brief series on the U.S.-Israel-Iran Regional Crisis 2026. Brief number 1 covered the macro framing across all the 11 OIC clusters. Brief 2 went deep on food and agriculture. And our third brief, the most recent one, examined the Islamic finance sector. All three are fully accessible on the interactive dashboard, the link to which is in the Zoom chat. So please do take a look if you've missed our earlier sessions. And of course, a reminder to you all, once again, feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box at any time during the session, and we'll take them at the end of the panel. Today's focus is on textile and fashion retail, a sector that stands apart from everything we've covered so far. Unlike the food, energy, or Islamic finance sector, the OIC is actually a net exporter here in this sector, which will of course be covered in detail while we go through the insights brief. The shock in the sector is transmitting through two channels, the supply side pressure and the demand side pressure. Today's brief examines where that falls hardest across the value chain, and it will outline the strategic opportunities for OIC governments and industry to respond. Before we start with the brief presentation, let me flash a quick poll and get your opinion on this sector. So can we have our first poll? Okay. Let's hear from you. Which textile and fashion category do you think is most exposed to the current US-Israel-Iran regional crisis? Do you think it is the cotton category, man-made filaments, apparel, knitted apparel, or footwear? I'll give you 10 seconds to give your opinion on this. Which of these categories you think are most affected? Thank you so much for taking the poll. It'll be interesting to see your responses and what our findings have to say. Without any further delays, I would like to call on our DinarStandard experts to give you the insights. As you can see, most of you are saying the cottons category, followed by man-made filaments. So let's see what our data actually says. I'd like to call upon our Mr. Rafiddin Shiko, our CEO and Managing Director at DinarStandard, and of course, Aaliya, Senior Associate Modest Fashion Lead at DinarStandard. Over to you both. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iman, and warm greetings. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Thank you for joining on this very important topic that is in front of us that we have been tackling. A quick introduction for some of you who may be new to DinarStandard. We're a boutique research and advisory firm for over 15 years, specializing in the unique investment and growth opportunity thesis amongst the 57 OIC, mostly Muslim majority countries that are there globally, spanning from Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, to Sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa, obviously South Asia, GCC, Central Asia in particular. And in our work, as Iman mentioned, given this work that we're doing, we have been very much concerned with the regional war that's happening that is central to OIC countries and the major industry sectors that are being affected as a result. So today, textile and retail relating to the category of modest fashion, which is an area that we also specialize in, is our focus. What we are trying to do with this session, and we have a briefing that we're going to share, Aaliya, my colleague, will share with you. The goal is not how are the corporates, companies, or governments responding to this crisis immedately. When COVID happened, because of COVID, a lot of the governments prepared, had set up mechanisms, and companies that set up mechanisms to deal with being more resilient, anticipating more potential events like that. So when it comes to immediate crisis, that is being addressed. So what we're trying to do here is really, what are the medium-term and long-term strategic options for OIC governments and corporates to achieve economic stability and growth amid this regional crisis in particular? As you all know, the February 28th event and the subsequent closure of Strait of Hormuz had triggered largest oil supply disruption in modern history. Energy has been the primary economic driver from which cascading effects originate: inflation, supply chain disruptions, fiscal, food security, and all downstream consequences of this energy shock. And for textile and fashion retail, the shock now runs through synthetic fiber costs, apparel manufacturing, retail margins, and changing consumer spending patterns, which in this brief we will examine. In order to do so, as we all know, the crisis is ongoing. So if we look at, first of all, just to share with you, we have a robust methodology by which we've been developing these insights brief to provide fact-based perspectives that are based on our experience, expert inputs, our own models, and looking at public sources as well, and certainly leveraging some of the AI tools, although we pride ourselves in ensuring that there is strong human-in-the-loop element in our experience-based view that comes into play. So this is just a little bit about the methodology on how we've developed our own thinking. So next, as part of this thinking, the first key aspect is to look at the different scenarios. As we all know, that the war is still ongoing, and it seems to be protracted as of the latest state, and I'll speak to that. But we essentially had identified 4 scenarios. The one is that we come to a ceasefire, and which will still result in a new normal. We're not going to go back to how we were in terms of the business trade flows and supply chains as we, and we'll talk about that a bit later. The other scenarios are scenario 2, where there would be civil unrest in Iran, which hasn't happened, and we don't see that happening. Scenario 3, a protracted war with a few variations, which is where we are roughly. Although we see it coming to some form of a ceasefire soon, we all hope. But that's kind of how we've based our analysis on. For each of these scenarios, just taking the two wide the spectrums, implications are very strong that connect also and downstream or to the textile sector. So with this, in just the next slide, I'll just show you how these scenarios are currently interacting. And today, in between these three scenarios, we seem to be sitting closer to the protracted war. But the latest, as you know, there's a little bit of a lull in the war currently, while there's some negotiations happening. We don't know where that's going to end up, given the previous rounds of such negotiations. So we could still see a protracted war. Either way, there are implications for the textile and retail sector, and there are strategic options that we're going to present to you. So with this, I'll pass it to Aaliya, who will go into textile and retail in particular.
Okay. Thank you, Brother Rafiuddin. Assalamu alaikum and welcome everybody yet again. And I'm glad to be able to take you through our findings today. So before looking at how the crisis affects the sector, it's important for us to understand the position of where the OIC starts from. So unlike many other Islamic economy sectors we've covered in this briefing series, textile and fashion retail enters this crisis from a position of strength. It's actually the only, as Iman had mentioned, it's only the only Islamic economy sector where OIC countries collectively hold a structural global trade surplus. And that immediately changes the conversation. So rather than asking how do we protect a vulnerable industry, we're asking how do we preserve and build on an existing competitive advantage. So the ecosystem spans the entire value chain. It begins with synthetic fiber, moves into fabrics, then apparel manufacturing, retail, and finally home textiles. So different OIC countries play different roles across that chain, but together they represent one of the world's most significant textile manufacturing ecosystem. One thing that immediately stands out is the scale of apparel manufacturing. So at roughly 66 billion US dollars in exports, it's several times larger than any of the other segments, and this makes it the backbone of the OIC textile economy. At the same time, Muslim consumers spent around 374 billion US dollars on clothing and footwear in 2024. And with that figure, it's projected to now exceed 444 billion US dollars by 2029. So the sector benefits from something quite unique, a globally competitive production base combined with one of the fastest growing consumer markets in the world. And that combination means that the crisis doesn't fundamentally weaken the industry's long-term outlook. It simply changes where the pressure points are. And that's exactly what we'll explore next. Okay, so now that we've established where the OIC sits today, let's look at how the crisis actually affects the textile and fashion value chain. So there are really two channels which we need to monitor. So the first is the supply side, where we see that rising oil prices increase the petrochemical cost. And this feeds directly into the synthetic fibers like polyester, nylon, and acrylic. And then at the same time, manufacturers face higher energy, freight, and insurance costs, while sourcing becomes more complex and lead times become longer. The second is the demand side. Inflation puts pressure on household budgets, so consumers become more selective in what they buy. The retailers find it harder to pass on higher costs, and purchasing shifts toward value brands, essentials, and longer-lasting products. These two channels don't move at the same speed. Supply side impacts appear almost immediately, while your demand shifts develop over months. But ultimately, both will reshape competitiveness across the industry. So the next question is, how does an increase in oil prices actually end up affecting what consumers buy? So let's follow that transmission chain. So this slide connects the dots from energy markets all the way through to the consumer. Everything begins with petrochemicals. Higher oil prices increase the costs of PTA and MEG, which are the key inputs used to produce polyester fibers. And those higher costs then flow into yarns and fabrics before reaching garment manufacturers. This is particularly relevant for modest fashion because many of its core product categories, including abayas, hijabs, sport hijabs, jilbabs, and everyday modest wear, rely heavily on polyester blends for the durability, drape, wrinkle resistance, and affordability. So at each stage, another layer of cost is added, whether that's energy-intensive dyeing, freight, insurance, or production costs. So by the time the products reach retailers, brands are facing a difficult decision. Either they absorb those higher costs or they pass them on to the consumers through higher prices. Eventually, the consumer responds by buying differently. We expect stronger demand for value apparel, basics, and affordable modest fashion, while more discretionary purchases, such as your premium occasion wear and higher-end fashion collections, would slow. What's important here is that every part of the value chain feels the shock, but not equally. Upstream producers experience the cost increase first, while the downstream retailers would experience weaker consumer demand later. And that's why the end market impacts shown on the right aren't random. We expect earlier pressure on polyester blend-based abayas and hijabs, followed by longer lead times for knitwear and modest basics. Then margin pressure for apparel brands before the effects eventually reach home textile. That allows us to identify which product categories are likely to experience the greatest disruption. So not all parts of the textile value chain are affected equally. So our next step was to identify where the OIC is most exposed. So earlier on, we had a poll, and in that poll, most of the respondents had said cotton, but we also see that the second most common answer was man-made filament. So according to our analysis, that would actually be the most affected segment. So when it comes to when it comes to textiles, rather than treating it all as a single industry, we've ranked each of the major product categories according to both its supply exposure and its demand exposure. So one finding stood out immediately. So that is man-made filaments and man-made staple fibers rank comfortably at the top. These are the most exposed because they combine high dependence on petrochemical feedstocks with very large import volumes. Another interesting finding is that apparel doesn't rank as acute. Instead, it sits in the demand drag category. And that's because the biggest challenge isn't producing garments, it's whether the consumers continue buying them. Cotton and footwear also experience significant cost shocks, but through different mechanisms than synthetic fibers. So already we can see that not every category requires the same policy response. The next question is where those exposures actually sit across the OIC. Looking first at demand within the OIC, two patterns emerge. The first, the two acute categories, man-made filaments and staple fibers, are actually the most geographically diversified. No single region accounts for more than around a quarter of imports. By contrast, categories like cotton and knitted apparel are much more concentrated. South Asia alone represents about over half of the OIC cotton imports, while the GCC accounts for almost half of knitted apparel imports. So this means that concentrated regional markets may experience stronger practical impacts than the overall category ranking alone would suggest. But demand is only half the picture, so we also need to understand where these products are coming from. When we shift from importers to suppliers, the underlying vulnerability becomes much clearer. China is the largest supplier across all 5 categories, providing anywhere between 1/5 and almost 2/3 of OIC imports, depending on the product. What's particularly striking is that the two acute synthetic fiber categories also have the lowest levels of intra-OIC sourcing. So in other words, these are precisely the products where the OIC remains most dependent on external suppliers. By comparison, apparel and cotton already have much stronger regional supply bases, showing that regional value chains are achievable where manufacturing capability already exists. Together, these two slides tell us exactly where intervention is needed, not simply because products are exposed, but because current sourcing patterns create structural vulnerability. Those vulnerabilities become the starting point for our strategic recommendations. So up to this point, we've diagnosed the problem, and this slide shifts the discussion towards solutions. So rather than proposing isolated initiatives, we've grouped the challenges into 4 strategic levers. Each addresses a different structural weakness revealed by the analysis. The first is sovereignty. This is about reducing dependence on critical imported inputs by strengthening domestic and regional production capability, from synthetic fibers right through to manufacturing. The second is sourcing. Here, the objective isn't self-sufficiency, it's diversification. So the more diversified the supplier base becomes, the more resilient the industry is to geopolitical disruption. The third lever is innovation. Even if costs remain elevated, producers can stay competitive through smarter manufacturing, digital supply chain visibility, and next-generation sustainable materials. Finally, ecosystem. Long-term competitiveness depends on more than factories. It requires brands, standards, certification, designers, investment, and collaboration across the OIC. So each of these 4 levels then translates into 2 practical strategic options, giving us 8 recommendations altogether. Let's look at those recommendations. So up to this point, we focused on understanding the problem. And this slide is really the answer to the question, what should government and industry actually do? These aren't 8 independent recommendations. They form a roadmap that starts with reducing today's vulnerabilities before building a globally competitive OIC textile and modest fashion ecosystem over the next 3 to 5 years. So the first lever is sovereignty, and it focuses on strengthening the very beginning of the value chain. The first recommendation is to expand synthetic fiber production. Our analysis showed that man-made filaments and staple fibers are the OIC's most exposed categories, largely because they're heavily dependent on imports from outside the OIC. So countries with strong petrochemical industries, such as Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar, already produce the feedstocks needed for polyester. The opportunity is to move further downstream into fiber production rather than exporting raw petrochemicals. The second recommendation is to build integrated fiber to fashion value chains. Today, petrochemicals might come from the GCC, fabrics from Turkey or Indonesia, garments from Pakistan or Bangladesh, and brands from somewhere else entirely. Integrating more of those stages within the OIC allows members to capture more value while reducing exposure to global supply disruptions. The second strategic lever is sourcing, which is about making supply chains more resilient. The China Plus One strategy doesn't mean replacing China, it means reducing dependence on a single source. Our supplier analysis showed that China remains the largest supplier across all 5 categories, diversifying towards producers like Turkey, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Egypt, and Indonesia creates greater resilience while keeping more trade within the OIC. Alongside that is strengthening OIC textile trade corridors. That means reducing trade barriers, improving logistics, and making it easier for manufacturers in one OIC country to source from another. Instead of viewing the OIC as dozens of individual markets, this is about operating more like an integrated regional manufacturing network. The third lever is innovation. Higher costs don't necessarily mean losing competitiveness if productivity improves at the same time. The first recommendation is to invest in circular textiles and next-generation fibers. This includes recycled polyester, textile recycling, and more sustainable materials that reduce dependence on virgin petrochemicals. Countries such as Indonesia and Malaysia are already investing in circular textile initiatives, creating an opportunity for the OIC to become a leader in sustainable modest fashion. The second recommendation is smart manufacturing and supply chain visibility. Technologies like AI production planning, digital product passports, and end-to-end traceability help manufacturers respond more quickly to disruptions, while also meeting the growing sustainability and transparency requirements of export markets such as Europe. The final strategic lever is ecosystem, and this moves beyond manufacturing into creating globally competitive fashion industries. The OIC Fashion Accelerator is about supporting designers, SMEs, and Muslim-owned brands so that more value is created through branding and design, not only contract manufacturing. We've seen strong ecosystems emerging in places like the UAE, Indonesia, and Turkey, and this is an opportunity to connect those ecosystems across the OIC. Finally, an OIC textile sustainability framework would establish common standards around sustainability, traceability, and certification. As global buyers increasingly demand proof of ethical sourcing and environmental performance, having harmonized standards would strengthen both export and consumer confidence across OIC markets. Some of these recommendations, such as supply diversification and digital supply chain visibility, can begin immediately. Others, like integrated fiber production and regional value chains, require longer-term industrial investment, but together they move the OIC from reacting to the crisis towards using it as a catalyst for building a stronger, more competitive textile and modest fashion ecosystem. Of course, not every region should pursue every strategy equally. Each region already has different strengths and capabilities. So our final step was to map where each strategic option is likely to have the greatest impact across the OIC. So starting with the GCC, so firstly, just to explain the way the size of each circle reflects on the depth of focus and not necessarily the importance. So starting with the GCC, the opportunity lies in upstream integration. Strong petrochemical industries make it well positioned to expand synthetic fiber production, while its consumer market also makes it a natural home for modest fashion brands and digital innovation. West Asia, which is outside the GCC, has more balanced profile. It plays an important supporting role across sourcing, apparel manufacturing, and home textiles. North Africa stands out for integrated textile manufacturing. Countries like Egypt and Morocco already have strong apparel and fabric production and are well positioned to benefit from nearshoring into Europe. Southeast Asia, particularly Indonesia and Malaysia, shows strength across multiple fronts. Existing synthetic fiber capability, growing circular textile initiatives, and the region's largest Muslim consumer market make it a strong candidate for innovation and ecosystem development. South Asia remains one of the OIC's manufacturing powerhouses. Pakistan and Bangladesh already possess deep expertise in cotton, yarns, and garment production, making them central to resilient regional sourcing. Sub-Saharan Africa represents more of a medium-term opportunity, while manufacturing capacity is still developing. The region offers significant long-term potential through industrialization and regional integration. And then finally, Central Asia, including Turkey, emerges as perhaps the most strategically important manufacturing hub. It combines strong synthetic fiber production, fabric manufacturing, and apparel capability with proximity to both European and Middle Eastern markets. And that makes it central to integrated value chains and future China plus one sourcing strategies. So, yeah, we've spent the last few minutes looking at the macro picture and how the conflict is reshaping supply chains, the consumer demand, and the strategic priorities for the OIC and textile industry. So, we'll next move on to our panel discussion, but I'll hand over to Iman to lead us into that.
Thank you so much, Aaliya and Mr. Rafiuddin. A sector with real competitive strength, but the crisis is testing that strength at every layer for sure. Two findings personally I feel that stand out. Number one, man-made fibers. They carry the highest acute exposure with the lowest intra-OIC sourcing, which is a structural gap, of course. And but at the same time, apparel and cotton are already showing strongest intra-OIC supply base. This is both a warning and a roadmap. Great. So before we move to the panel, let me take you through how DinarStandard can support the OIC governments and corporates navigating this landscape. As you've seen throughout this brief, DinarStandard supports OIC governments and corporates in three ways. On the screen, as you can see, through consultancy, vulnerability assessment, strategic planning consulting. Number two, our policy architect function through Impact Intel, DinarStandard's proprietary data intelligence platform. And lastly, through live signal sensing tool that tracks trade, investment, and policy shifts in real time. And specifically for retail and textile, our expert practice team, as you would see on the next slide, is led by Rafiuddin Shiko, Rimal Shefaki, Connor Clifford Murphy, Atif Raza, and of course, Aaliya Mia. The expert team are glad to support governments, financial institutions, and corporates working through these strategic options. Contact details are on the slide for your reference. Before we proceed, please be reminded once again that you can post your questions in the Q&A box. We'll get to as many questions as we can after the panel. And of course, you can download the Insights brief. The link is also on the Zoom chat and the QR code is on your screens. now, the moment we've been building to. I'm delighted to introduce our distinguished panel and moderator, Aaliya, to lead the discussion on retail and textile outlook for OIC countries. Once again, welcome to our panelists, Atteqa Malik, Karachi Biennale Trust Chairperson, Board of Directors, Pakistan UK Business Council, Director GIA Export Marketing Services Limited. Welcome, Ms. Atteqa. Rabia Z. Zargarpur, expert in residence business of fashion consultancy, Sharjah Enterprise Center, business strategy consultant, Rabia Z. Zargarpur Consulting. Welcome, Rabia. And of course, Mr. Basri Kamba, chair of Rantai Textile Lestari, Indonesia. Welcome, Pa Basri. I'll hand over to Aaliya to lead our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iman. And welcome again to all of our esteemed panel. We really look forward to speaking with you today. So, of course, as we're speaking now, everything that we've just spoken now, that's only going to be taken to the next level by hearing from people like you who are actually on the ground working in this industry every day. Amongst the three of you, you all represent manufacturing, modest fashion entrepreneurship, and the textile industry across some of the most important OIC markets. So I'm really looking forward to hearing how your experiences compare with the trends that we've just discussed. But just quickly before we go to our discussion, we just have a poll for our audience. We just have a quick poll for our audience, which will be interesting to see what your response is and how our panelists respond to this later on. Okay, so our question to the audience. So what should be the OIC? Oh, can we get the poll question? Okay, thanks. All right. So our question is, what should be the OIC's highest priority over the next 5 years to strengthen its textile and fashion industry? Should we be building regional fiber to fashion manufacturing value chains, expanding sustainable and circular textile production, strengthening intra-OIC sourcing and trade corridors, or developing globally competitive modest fashion brands? Okay. We'll give you a quick 10 seconds to share your responses before we go into our discussion. Okay. All right. Thanks everyone for your responses. So based on the audience feedback, we see that developing globally competitive modest fashion brands is something that we believe is the highest priority for the next 5 years. So now let's hear from our panelists and hear what they have to say. Right. Okay, so the first question, which is to all of our panel members, in the presentation, we highlighted how rising energy costs, supply chain disruptions, and changing consumer demands are reshaping the textile and fashion industry. So from your perspective, what has been the biggest change on the ground over the past few months? Let's start with Sister Atteqa.
Great presentation. It actually covered a lot of things I was going to speak about, but I'll speak on the ground what I was going to name that rising raw material cost and rising fuel cost has greatly impacted on the ground manufacturing in Pakistan. And this indirectly has an increase in the dyeing and printing costs, which go up by from like 7 to 7.5%. What's happening at the end of the day, even cotton prices are going up about 8%. International cotton prices have gone up by 18%. So Pakistan being a very big manufacturer of cotton apparel has to import cotton as well. So this impact has resulted, along with the supplier reduced demand, right? Because the international demand for new and fast fashion is a bit halted at the moment. People are really holding on to their money because fuel prices have gone up crazy. Is that the suppliers in Pakistan are under pressure not to increase any prices. What they're doing is they're absorbing all these increases and just holding right now at the moment, and just with either zero margin or very little margin. They're just hoping that they can hold on until the crisis passes. They're literally holding with bated breath, you know. That is the current situation at the moment as far as apparel manufacturers are concerned.
Thanks for sharing that, Sister Atteqa. And Sister Rabia, from your perspective, which would probably be more on the retail front, how have you seen this? How has you seen this playing out?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you again for having me. That was a very insightful presentation. So from our perspective, I think one of the biggest, of course, similar to everyone else, I think the biggest change on the ground is that petrochemical and shipping shocks have definitely exposed our vulnerability to imported virgin synthetics, right? But the silver lining, I would say, in the UAE is that we aren't just standing still. I'm really happy and pleased to witness a massive acceleration towards domestic textile circularity. We are slowly starting to see some local brands and manufacturers pivot to homegrown sustainable solutions, utilizing like green spun fabrics, which is produced locally by Degrade. And what they do is they convert recycled plastic, which we have tons and tons of, into textile. Yarn and textile. So tapping into also the other good thing that I've advocated for a very long time, and I'm glad to see now, is the local debt stock role. That's now also being utilized, and and that's great because that certainly helps to circumvent global shipping bottlenecks using what we have here locally already as debt stock. And I think the other thing is the mindset. I've seen a shift in the mindset on the ground. The mindset on the ground has moved from treating sustainability as a niche marketing trend to actually recognizing local circular fabrics as a critical supply chain buffer. So those are the major shifts that I've seen, and I'm really glad to see and as well as note here. So yeah. And of course, that doesn't turn affect retail, but I think that we have to sort of, work our way backwards, like backtrack. So yeah.
Okay. Thanks for sharing, Sister Rabia. And then, you made good mention of sustainability and that. So Basri would be able to, further expand on that and just discuss more in terms of, how he works very directly with, sustainable fabrics and that. So Basri, how have you seen that, this affected the current demand for, more sustainable fabrics and that sort of thing?
So, assalamu alaikum to everyone. Sorry, I still only have my audio. Anyway, so I think just like many other producing countries like Indonesia, right, we are severely affected by the situation, especially regarding on the price for the polyester, right, because it's coming from the oil. So I think that's a big challenge for us, and that's why so many producers are now looking at the potential of the recycled textile, the recycled materials. But still, it's not an easy one. So I like the idea from you, Aaliya, that number one, the OIC countries, should be, working together in collaborations, not looking at the OIC as a single country, right? And then because if in the current situations, you talk about margin, it's almost zero, right? And then commitment to buyers, because the price has already been, the raw materials for textile and garments, it's already been 30% and up to 40% increase. So that's very, very, challenging for so many of us here. So I think collaborations among IAC is one possibility, but of course it's not easy. It needs to be based on the good faith for everyone. And then the other idea that I look at your presentation is to develop the textile clusters. It's good, but who, where, and then how is the investment? So for us, from my perspective, from the perspective of Indonesia, because OIC, so we export almost $1 billion, per year to the OIC countries, to Turkey, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Malaysia. So I think one of the potential to work together is actually to work together in providing the availability of the recycled textile waste, right? Especially fiber to fiber. So thank you.
Thank you, Pak Basri. Okay, so we'll now move on to a bit more individual questions. So firstly for Sister Atteqa. So, in the briefing, we highlighted the China plus one sourcing and stronger regional textile value chains as one of the major opportunities. So from your perspective, what would Pakistan need to do to be able to capture more of that opportunity? And what barriers still need to be addressed?
So work has already been going on for many years on this China plus one. What's happened is that, first of all, we have this China-Pakistan gateway that's been built. It's a road that goes from a new port that has been helped build by China. It's a Gwadar port, and it goes all the way up to China. And already what's happened is that there is a lot of transport going on from that way. A lot of Chinese companies have also have had a placement in Pakistan. They are supplying raw material. So, for example, before Pakistan could only do cotton and cotton polyester blends. However, now what the world doesn't know is that because we have access to Chinese imported fabric of all kinds, whether it's microfiber or polyester based, and they are giving it available in small quantities. So this has opened up a new market for Pakistan. We can now do those products. So it's a right time. What's holding us back is that the rest of the buyers don't know this. So we need to make the world more aware what are the possibilities that now Pakistan can offer with the China, accessibility to Chinese raw material.
Okay, thank you. So in the same way, I think there's also a lot of opportunity for Indonesia. So that takes us to Pa Basri. So, right now we know that they are one of the largest textile industries in Southeast Asia, Indonesia. So how prepared do you think Indonesian manufacturers are for a prolonged period of higher energy costs and supply chain uncertainty?
Aaliya, I just mentioned right already that it's heavily affected by the situation, right? Especially polyester. And then, okay, people saying that, how about cotton, right? Yeah, the price might not directly affected by the situation, but the logistic is heavily affected, right? So yeah, it's affected.
Okay. And then now looking more towards, one of our recommendations was the OIC Modest Fashion Accelerator. So, Sister Rabia, from your experience supporting entrepreneurs in Sharjah via Sheraa, I mean, what would you say would make the biggest difference in helping modest fashion brands becoming more globally competitive?
First of all, I have to say that an OIC Modest Fashion Accelerator, honestly, is a changing recommendation, honestly, so hats off. Through my mentorship at Sheraa and Modest Fashion Academy, I have seen and I continue to see incredible creative talent. But creative vision alone obviously is not enough to build a sustainable and scalable global brand. So, startups always struggle with high MOQs and fragmented suppliers. So an accelerator must connect founders directly to local circular hubs, like in UAE, we have Nasij, which is an outstanding, it's brand new, outstanding circular initiative. regional recycling plants, local sustainable textile mills, so they can source, so that the startups can source high quality eco-conscious fabrics locally with lower MOQs. So it's really important. The other thing, and really crucial for global competitiveness, is that we must teach emerging brands to adopt circular business models right from the inception. I think that is so important. I mean, look at the explosive growth of regional circular platforms. Maybe you haven't heard of, but when I say local, it's more regional here, like Wear Twice. Something like overseas, we have so many other ones in the West, from Depop and so many other. But here we have one called Wear Twice, which is like a peer-to-peer pre-loved fashion. And then, of course, the luxury closet, which is for circular luxury. So, thinking of these type of initiatives as well is extremely important, because modest wear, formal abayas, occasional garments are actually quite high value, durable investments. So, and Accelerator shouldn't just train the brands, I think, to just sell once. It should really empower startups to build brand-backed resale, trade-in, circular repair programs. So by partnering with established regional re-commerce platforms, or building, sort of a closed-loop buyback model, brands can unlock, recurring revenue, increase customer lifetime value, and of course eliminate inventory waste, right? So when an OIC accelerator combines all of this, like combining sustainable supply chains with circular tech-enabled business models, our regional modest fashion brands won't just compete globally. I think really, inshallah, they will define the future of ethical fashion, ethical retail and fashion. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for your contributions and your insights. So we have one last question, which will be to all the panel members. And this goes back to what we've asked our audience as well. So looking ahead in the next 3 to 5 years, do you believe that this crisis will ultimately make the OIC textile and fashion industry stronger or weaker? And what gives you confidence or concern about where the industry is heading? Babasri, oh yeah, Sister Atteqa, you can go ahead.
Okay, so one thing I forgot to mention is that there are two different fashion industries going on in Pakistan. One is the manufacturing industry for Western wear, and then we have the local market where modest fashion is flying. Okay, I mean, I cannot even begin to tell you how amazing the local market, retail markets are, and the fashion industry is taking off. I resonate with what Rabia said, is that, there are all these brands who are doing so well locally, but they have no idea how to export. So I see a huge potential as a sourcing company. We continuously try to explain things like circular fashion and all the certifications that a local brand needs in order to export out of Pakistan. Europe has its own set of rules. I don't know what OIC countries have certifications for, but some of the certifications are ridiculously expensive for Europe. And they just don't make sense because they're pieces of paper at the end of the day, which are not implemented. It's just, guarantees. I think there should be one kind of certification which OIC should introduce. And if a startup can have that certification, it could be a green label, or it could be a sustainable, or it could be, social, like SEDEX, other social certifications. And with that one certification, it should give it ease to export to all the OIC countries. I think that will really help push inter-OIC country trade.
Yes. Thanks so much, Sister Atteqa. Babasri, would you like to go?
Sure, hang on. Can you hear me now, Aaliya?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I don't have the answer, whether Trump is going to still be the president of the US, So I think first we need to start a small project, whatever you have in your presentations, Aaliya, and also whoever have the first presentation. I think we should start one or two projects. I would like to propose this, for the development, for the establishments of the OIC cluster for circularity, which I think we have. Bangladesh, Indonesia, I think Pakistan also, right? I have friends in Pakistan that have already did this such thing instead of heavily relying on the virgin materials, right? So I think we should start collaboratively uh, trying this project for the the recycled material for textile and garment. We know that Indonesia is also modern ready. We are already at the process of discussions with some of the world technology providers for this one. But of course, together with Bangladesh, Pakistan, and I don't know which countries of the OIC, so we can build this one small project. You can call it as a cluster, and then start to build, to anticipate such thing happens again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Babasri. And then, of course, last but not least, Sister Rabia, I'd love to hear from you as well.
So I think for sure that we will be significantly stronger, most definitely, because geopolitical shocks usually force, innovation, and which is always long overdue. I mean, I'm most excited because we're moving away from a fragile, linear model reliant on, just cheap imported synthetic fabrics towards a more agile, circular, and more regionally, I think, a sovereign value chain, really. For us, it's extremely exciting because, as you pointed out, GCC is when it comes to imports, we are the top, right? So being a bit more self-sufficient and self-reliant is the way to go. So I'm extremely excited that and what gives me immense confidence is this rapid emergence of domestic textile circularity and government-backed infrastructure right here in the UAE. As I said, more recently, just back in June, we've launched Nasij, which is outstanding, and it's I can't wait to see what else comes out of that. And then, if you pair that with like our UAE circular infrastructure and government hubs with like creative agility of our regional entrepreneurs, right? Like within, whether it's Sheraa or Modest Fashion Academy or inshallah, the accelerator, the OIC Modest Fashion Accelerator, inshallah, you build an industry that is both environmentally resilient and commercially unbeatable, right? So I really think in about 3 to 5 years, the OIC won't just be a consumer market for global fashion. I think, inshallah, through local innovation, circular textiles, and intra-OIC trade corridors, which is, I think, really, really important, I think we will be the global benchmark for, inshallah, for sustainable, ethical, and modest fashion. I really do believe that.
Inshallah. Thank you all once again for your insights. It's really been good and really insightful for us to understand, get the layout of what's actually happening in the industry and at your different areas as well. So we have our last few minutes left of our session, and we have some questions in the chat. So let us take those. Okay, so all right. So the first question we have is, obviously, South Asia is the biggest textile market in the OIC. So how has energy prices impacted the textile industry in South Asia, notably in Bangladesh? And do these disruptions hold long or short-term repercussions? Sister Atteqa, we can ask you to respond to that, given you would be able to tell us about the situation in Pakistan in terms of the energy prices.
Yeah, sorry, I can't talk about Bangladesh, but in Pakistan, it's the impact of the energy prices has been very, very, very severe. 30%. Petrol prices have gone up 30%. So you can imagine how that affects every aspect of the business. And what's happened is the people are having to pay more for energy, and their salaries have not gone up. So it affects the supplier and the demand. So everywhere you can see that in the local retail markets, there are sales going on, 40% off, 70% off. People are not able to purchase at the regular prices. And household budgets are also limited now. So that's the demand side. Although people spend millions of rupees every year on clothing alone, but you can see a dip in that. The other thing is that in the supplier, it's become very, very hard for a manufacturer to maintain their prices because, as you can imagine, I explained earlier that the Pakistani cotton has also gone up, international cotton has gone up, dyeing and printing, which uses energy, every aspect. Then we also see shipping prices. So because the customers are having to pay so much for freight, they're trying to cut their costs in other places. And eventually the impact comes on the suppliers' prices. So whatever profit is left, it's a very, very tight. Many people have gone out of manufacturing. Another important thing has happened is the duty that Donald Trump has placed on Pakistani exports, which is about 29% or something. A lot of big factories which used to export to the US have shut down. Now Pakistan is moving from textile, that the government is giving a lot of attention to IT exports now, which has shown a lot of growth. So yeah, it's interesting. However, I will say one thing that we support as a sourcing company. We support value added fashion. So what we do, we don't do modest fashion, but I just got to thinking after attending this seminar that that could be also called value added, and the demand for value added never goes out. So our supply has always been to very large sizes. So we supply from small to 5XL. Even during COVID, my personal business did not get affected because even when people were sitting at home, they needed sweatshirts and pants, and they have children who are oversized and partners who are oversized. So our business never got affected. Even today, the customers we are providing to in UK and France, their business has not gone down. It's just the prices that are tough. The demand is still there. So I feel that if we include modest fashion as a value-added addition to all OIC countries, I think that it's definitely got a scale for huge growth. Sorry, I digressed, but
No problem. Yeah, thank you so much.
I showed the bad side of what's happening, but I also see an optimistic result of this pricing.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing. On to the next question. We have a question for Sister Rabia from Hani Herani. She asks if what do you think is the role of the education sector in the sustainable modest fashion industry?
Well, education is extremely important, absolutely. You know, you need the knowledge, you need the awareness, but you also need the practice. So education without practice is, you know, not the way to go. So, but as a starting point, absolutely, the awareness needs to be there. You have to understand what is sustainable fashion, and I think when it comes to modest fashion, it should go hand in hand. I'm just so shocked that till today, you know, modest fashion still is associated to fast fashion. It shouldn't be, because we should be a very a wholesome, clean, you know, climate conscious segment, but we're not. So I think that there is definitely missing a lot when it comes to the awareness of it in our sector. But sustainable fashion, yes. The entire industry has changed. I mean, the old thinking of it's too expensive, you know, to work with sustainable fabrics or to go into sustainable manufacturing. It is not true at all, and I can tell you that firsthand. So yes, the education is important, but I think what's really more important or next level to that is, you know, perhaps internships, perhaps mentorships, perhaps, you know, really like getting into the experience full on, hands on, to understand what the impacts are and what the importance is and the significance of this. which I think, like I said, I'm still in shock that we were even discussing it as a possibility. It should be 100%, no second thoughts about how important this is and how it should be infused into everyone creating something, moving forward. So yeah.
Thank you, Sister Rabia. Okay, we'll take one last question from Husama Tagi. He says that, I believe one reason China is still ahead of Turkey is how easy it is to do business with them, with platforms like Alibaba or Made in China. So how can Turkey or other OIC countries improve its ease to do business with and become a real competitor to China? Yeah, I'll open up the floor. Who would like to take that?
Look, one of the things that is very important is delivery time. Most people say to me that, I order something and it will come to me in a week, right? That's one thing. The other thing is design capability. Often Pakistani suppliers get criticized. They're like, I'm trying to explain something to you. My Chinese supplier will give me the design and the sample within a day. So these are things that we are very bad at. If we can improve these things, I don't know how, but if we can improve these things, then we can stand a chance at competition,
Thank you, Sister Atteqa. Sister Rabia, is there anything you'd like to share based on your experience with working with international suppliers?
The thing is that I don't believe in cheap and cheerful and quick and fast. So I'm actually very anti that. So, platforms like or marketplaces like Alibaba can be great for just ready-made stuff. But if we're talking about actually putting thought and putting not copy pasting stuff, but actually putting mind into it, thought into it, heart into it, and creating something meaningful, something valuable, it's challenging to do it through platforms like Alibaba. But for ready-made items, absolutely. What can others do? I mean, the language barriers are always there. Like I said, wholesale, and that's a whole other market. That's a whole other thing. But when we're talking about manufacturing, and for manufacturing, I think that it's going to be hard for places like Turkey to compete with ready-made items that are, that are so cheaply available in countries like China. So, but I'm not a fan. So yeah, I'm the last person you should ask.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have time to address some of the other questions, but we will send out some emails as to address those. Yeah, thank you yet again to our panelists, Sister Atteqa, Sister Rabia, Pa Basri. Thank you so much for your insights and adding so much value to our discussion today. So I'll hand it back to Iman to close off for us.
Thank you so much to our panelists, Atteqa, Malik, Rabia, Pa Basri, and of course Aaliya for moderating. I also want to acknowledge and thank Mr. Rafiuddin Shukr for the brief series insights he gave earlier. And of course, thank you all for joining us today. The brief and dashboard remain accessible via the chat link on your screens. Please explore and share widely. We'll close as we have been doing across this series with words that feel especially fitting given the times we are navigating together. فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. Indeed, with hardship comes ease. Indeed, with hardship comes ease. We pray that Allah grants ease and stability to all OIC economies and communities navigating this crisis. Thank you all once again for joining us. We hope to see you at our next roundtable, so watch out for the announcement. Thank you.